think we all know that Mighty Morphin Power Rangers is one of the absolute iconic franchises of all time. But with the Jonathan and Twizzle project coming very soon, I wouldn't be surprised if they ended up utilizing all of these characters of where they came from. Them being on TV, being there from Angel Grove, California, based on what they did in their Ranger careers during the beginning of Mighty Morphin. Like, we want to know where you came from, how you became this person and that person. So, with that in mind, Screen Rant just put out an article just now that really made me realize if Jonathan reboots Mighty Morphin, for which I'm hoping he does, I would want him to utilize the characters a bit better. Because there are chances that Mighty Morphin might end up becoming more successful under Jonathan and Twizzle. Now that Hasbro and Netflix and them are union now. And I wouldn't be surprised either if they were to do a multiverse universe of the Power Rangers, bring back the old cast of Mighty Morphin with the new cast of Mighty Morphin, and you could just create one gigantic dinosaur team to put a stop of Rita, Zed, and everybody else. Or it could just be a new original villain that is trying to destroy timelines from Rangers gaining their dinosaur powers from Mighty Morphin, Dino Thunder, Dino Charge, Dino Fury, you name it. So I think you already know what this part is about. The one and only Trini Kwan. And her birthday was celebrated last month, and I didn't even realize it until now. But her character in season 1 was done dirty because I feel like they didn't really utilize her character a bit better in terms of her just being a Power Ranger and all of that. But honestly, the Boom Studio Comics did so much better with the characters than they did with the show. Even though I do appreciate the show for what it did for me in my childhood and to my adulthood in terms of story, you know, besides the costumes and all of that, but we're talking about writing and good storytelling. But the thing about Trini is that even though she is a beautiful woman, even though I like her more than Kimberly, but that's okay. But at the same time, she didn't really have anything going for her. So I pretty much prefer comic Trini than the TV show Trini, in my opinion. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers never settled where Trini and her family were from. Instead, it combining aspects from different cultures into her character without properly caring about establishing her heritage. For example, Trini's uncle was Japanese. Some details about the character had to do with Korea, and her signature martial arts style came from China. Trini, who played Trini in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, was Vietnamese American. The Power Rangers comics would establish Trini's mother and father as being Korean and Taiwanese, respectively. Yet the TV series never incorporated this. As one of the first Asian superheroes in an American production, Trini deserved the better. Now, like I said, the Boom Studio Comics did a good job on establishing her character in terms of letting us know about her heritage, why her parents are Korean and Chinese. So basically, she's a Vietnamese American. That could have easily be put on the show back in the day, but I really don't know why Cheryl Saban and everybody else that wrote Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Season 1 didn't really acknowledge that. Even though she's Asian, you could have easily put that in the show and explain her background a bit better. And yet, Kimberly was the only one that actually had a background story about her parents being divorced. And yet the comics, once again, did what the show could have done. Now, if you know about this image, this was the scene when they played a clip in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Once and Always, where Kimberly and Zach created a song called Down the Road, was try to cheer up Tommy Oliver because he was going through phases of losing his Green Ranger powers. But the real meaning of this part is where they did a tribute to both Trini and Jason David Frank. Now, even though I got emotional watching that scene last year when the special came out, so I'm wondering what they have to say about this part. Power Rangers Season 2, Episode 11 saw Tommy Oliver accepting he will lose his Green Ranger powers and will have to exit the team. The song of Kutaro, which is about a Kutaro turning into a monster, ends with Kimberly and Zach performing a song they wrote for Tommy as a goodbye to their friend. While this moment was meant to be a temporary farewell to Tommy ahead of his eventual return as the White Ranger, it has since become a very sad scene following the death of Trini and Jason David Frank. The song was even used during the Power Rangers Once and Always tribute to the two actors. It wasn't not just saying that a few seconds ago, how Once and Always did a tribute to both Trini and Frank. And I could see why they would say that it's hard to watch because of this scene. I mean, of course, it's going to become more emotional and hard and difficult to see at the same time, knowing that both Rangers are no longer with us. So I can see why they would call it an unwatchable moment, because it's certain scenes about Mighty Morphin. Well, certain scenes about Mighty Morphin that is like too iconic. The lyrics of Down the Road talk about how it is impossible to predict what life has in store for people and how scary the thought of change is. Ooh, man. And it's funny because back then I didn't really pay attention to the episode until I was watching Multiverse's reaction to the episode, up until they came up with this part about how it was explaining about how life is going to be like going forward and how scary changes can be in times. Yo, y'all got to give me a moment for this one because it really hit me hard. The song also talks about how someone is never alone when they have friends and how memories never die. Not only to the lyrics, no. The song also talks about how someone is never alone when they have friends and how memories never die. Not only due to the lyrics, become extremely emotional when considering the death of two of the show's lead actors, but the episode itself hits a lot different now. Much of it is about saying goodbye to Tommy, and both Trini and Tommy are shown back to back, where Kimberly is performing a song. And like I said, anytime when they do that scene, it gets me every time because I grew up with Mighty Morphin. I understand why they would call this part very hard to watch. So this is where Bul and Skull become police officers in Season 3. And personally, I am not the biggest fan of Season 3 in my opinion, because I feel like they were better off as just being bullies and all of that instead of police officers. You know, I was kind of used to them making fun of the Power Rangers, or the Power Rangers making fun of them though, but I don't know, man. I just think Season 3 was kind of the weakest in my opinion. Bul and Skull were the Power Rangers' first comic relief duo, and there have been dozens of attempts to replicate their dynamic since the end of the Zonon era. Interestingly, while Bul and Skull were the bullies, the Power Rangers were usually the ones making fun of the duo and not the other way around. Still, although some of the comedy around Bul and Skull were harmless and appropriate for a kid show, many bits were entirely about Bulk's physique. The Power Rangers never made fun of Bulk's weight, but the show itself did. From physical gags to the name of the character. You know, I didn't really understand about this until you brought it up. I mean, Bulk is the reason why Mighty Morphin was successful back in the day, because he was the funniest. You know, you can't do any of this stuff now because you know the SJWs and the feminists will be going crazy online, like using the show of quote unquote fatophobia and all that bull crap. So of course they'll come up with anything just to try to cancel the show for one thing. But still. Alright, so this is where the final times where the original cast were together before Austin, Walter, and 3 left the show because of how bad Saban was paying these actors. And this was the summer of season 2 when they were filming season 2. Around 94, before the actual show came out and before certain episodes featuring these Rangers before they decided to just go their separate ways. And I think we all know the history and the dark history of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers behind the scenes wise. You know, of how the show was non-union, so you couldn't pay these actors more money to do like certain scenes and all of that. Power Rangers Season 2, Episode 20, Opposites Attract, marks the final time the original Power Rangers, including Sixth Ranger Tommy, worked together on screen. It must be noted that Zach, Trini, and Jason will continue to appear for a couple of episodes after Opposite Attract, but always through reused footage and body doubles. This is when 3 trained Walter Jones and ASJ left Power Rangers due to a salary dispute. In hindsight, knowing that the original team would never be together again makes Opposite Attract one of the most difficult Power Rangers episodes to get through on a rewatch. And that's the sad part, like I said, because Hollywood is full of corporate freaks, you know, succotash, whatever you want to call them. They're all about themselves. They don't want to pay these actors nothing. And it's obvious to me that season 2 was a bit of a mess once Tommy became the White Ranger. You know, a terrible leader at best, in my opinion. But the doubles for Jason, Zach, and Trini were a bit of a turnoff for a lot of us now that we're watching the show now. Back then, kids didn't really care because they'll realize something that is extremely off after the original actors left. So the voice dubbing was pretty bad, especially Jason and Trini's. But I think Zach's was a bit fine because even though the guy who played his cousin was dubbing the Black Ranger, and funny enough, the guy who played Zach's cousin was originally going to be the Black Ranger for season 1 and season 2. And they did say that he actually auditioned for the part, but didn't become the Black Ranger. So there you go. 3 Trini tragically passed away on September 3rd, 2001. Austin St. John would eventually return to Power Rangers doing Zeo, the first of many appearances he would still make on the franchise's shows and movies. Lastly, Walter Jones will only return to the franchise 29 years later in Power Rangers Once and Always. None of the Power Rangers crossover or anniversary episodes, including the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers reunion for the show's 30th anniversary, ever had the chance to reunite the original characters. Fortunately, Once and Always acknowledged and honor all of the characters. Still, Opposites Attract remains bittersweet, I bet. When you think about it though, even though most of the original actors went on to do their own thing, Amy Jo Johnson went on to do countless movies and make some albums, even though most of them were not that good in my opinion. Even though she's a fantastic singer, but her music, I wasn't a fan of, in my opinion. But even though her and ASJ made an appearance in a Turbo Power Rangers trash movie, I feel like they completely wasted them, in my opinion. Still, we all know that Three Train passed away back in '01. And we know the darker times behind the scenes and what happened after Mighty Morphin ended. So, now I think we all know how Power Rangers Lost Galaxy was at the time, where Trini was one of the sexiest villains of all time. But her actress did a good job of portraying her. But they're talking about an episode where she tried to spike some drinks and try to make simps fall in love with her. Kind of like how it is nowadays with OnlyFans and all of that crap. Power Rangers 1990s legacy goes beyond Mighty Morphin, for better and for worse. One of the worst episodes on the show came from 1999's Power Rangers Lost Galaxy, which is widely considered one of the best entries into the franchise. Cap and Space is the best entries because even though it was supposed to be the final season of Power Rangers, but due to how crazy the ratings were for a kid's show, it actually saved the franchise. Turbo almost killed Power Rangers, and yet after TJ and them got cast as Rangers, the show got good. But still, it was still considered the worst season. I don't know. I think you already know the deal. Which is widely considered one of the best entries in the franchise, but missed the mark with Stolen Beauty, Trini, an incredible villain looking for power and recognition from her father. Is suddenly placed into a story where she is bothered by the fact there are human women are prettier as her on Terra Venture. Most of the episode is about a monster searching for these pretty women to steal their beauty. An awful and problematic storyline that never fit into Lost Galaxy. I'm somewhat agree with that part, and I somehow disagree and agree at the same time. I agree that it felt kind of weird when they did that crap back in the day, because if they were to make a Power Rangers TV show now, if they wrote some of this stuff, you know social media, X, Twitter, Facebook, SJWs will be all over this show and ripping it to shreds. Like, I'm talking SJWs saying of how this show is a mockery to modern women, of how women ain't this and that. So all of this kind of reminds me of one of those times, if you ask me. And honestly, I didn't think it was that bad though, but was it the way it was delivered? Yeah, of course. But I didn't think it was that bad after all. So already see this clip? It's been making rounds on X, Instagram. Those are the fake doubles of Trini, Zach, and Jason, trying to make it seem like it's from season 1 of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. So, like I said, we know that the original actors actually left the show already, but not during this time behind the scenes during the summer of '94. Power transfer is one of the most important episodes in Power Rangers history, yet it is also one of the most poorly made. Rather than offering Jason, Zach, and Trini a proper farewell, now that their respective actors were exiting the show, the Power Rangers simply used old footage and stand-in actors. The contracts of Austin, Walter, and 3 had expired already, but the show should have handled their exits much better. Just the fact that an agreement for a new contract never came to be and the characters had to be written off is disappointing. But not having a proper goodbye made everything worse. I agree. I so agree with this part, because I feel like looking back at that episode, growing up, I still don't understand why they decided to make this decision. It's forgiving now, but back then, regardless of how everybody is thinking about this episode, one can assume that it was done very poorly of how these characters were portrayed, the way they left the show, the way they could have handled these characters a bit better while sending them into the peace conference. Like, what exactly do they do in the peace conference? Like, do they have a press conference? Do they talk about Angel Grove? Do they give back? But I'm gonna tell you what did it better was the comics. Even though I am not the biggest fan of the Necessary Evil arc, I hated that series, I hated that arc, but I think they did it way better because they didn't just go to the peace conference. They went to some galaxy to become the Omega Rangers, which is by far the best part about the Boom Studio comics. So, just so you know. To David Yost, who played Billy in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Zonon's actor David Fielding worked a day on Mighty Morphin Power Rangers at the same footage was used throughout the whole show, with the character being voiced by Robert L. Manahan. At a time where studios faced scanning actors for future use as being such an important topic of discussion, including amidst the writers and actor strikes, it is interesting to look back at Power Rangers and realize how Zonon's character was crafted. The only exception comes from the 1995 Power Rangers movie, during which Nicholas Bell played the character, because it was a different actor playing Zonon, and yet they couldn't bring back David Fielding to play the character. And honestly, if you notice in certain episodes, David Fielding only appeared in the first episode? That was literally the only time when he appeared in one episode of Day of the Dumpster and the show. After that, they were just using different footage of Zonon, and yet with two different actors. Maybe it could be the same actor, or it might be Robert L. or Nicholas. You name it. Like, you be the judge. I was talking about this last year when David Fielding made a tweet about it, and it makes sense of how Hollywood is continuing to be scums of the earth of not paying these actors respectably. So we all know the Power Rangers Lost Galaxy had one of the absolute craziest finales ever. One of the villains actually wanted to change his ways of being nice when he saved the little girl and the mom was freaking out. She didn't really thank him for him because he was basically evil. But the Lost Galaxy finale was pretty good for the most part. Power Rangers never took itself too seriously, and most episodes are full of silly moments. However, the show gets incredibly dark at the end of Power Rangers Lost Galaxy, during which Trini transformed herself, her army of minions, into boomers that would die destroying Terra Venture. This storyline was based on the Super Sentai footage available, but it was too big for a shift in tone for a show aimed at children regardless, not to mention the similarities to real-life cases of terrorism from before and after episode air. Oh wow. I had no idea all of this went on back then, because Chip Lynn and the writers were just cooking up something in Lost Galaxy. But I don't think the kids were stupid at the time. They were just growing up, you know, because the show was getting mature, it was getting darker. Like, when it was getting like that, that's how you know the show was getting really good. Like, they're finally growing up. They're no longer living in that nostalgia factor. You know, they want to tell some different stories and different moments. And, you know, Mighty Morphin had a lot of silly filler episodes, but they had some darker moments when the Thunder Swords were destroyed and when the Command Center got blown up to pieces, even though I absolutely hated the Alien Ranger saga. I think that's what killed season 3 for me, in my opinion. I only watched season 3 when Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the OGs on there, not the Alien Rangers. Just saying. But still, Lost Galaxy still had a good finale, but I kind of understand why they will call it tasteless because of how the way it is nowadays when it comes to like terrorisms and all of that. I mean, you look at the January 6th incident from 2021, I think you would know. We know the Power Rangers and Super Sentai are way different because in season 2 and 3, it was extremely American original footage. But in season 1 and early season 2, it was mostly Ranger footage and most of Ju 2 footage. But season 2, it had Die Ranger when it came to the Megazord battles, and Tommy only had one scene where his Japanese counterpart was seen arguing with some monster, but we didn't really see him in the Sentai footage fighting the monster. We only see him in the Megazord cockpit or whatever though, but still. I think Mighty Morphin season 1 did it a bit better, even though it was not perfect. I still think it was the most successful season of Power Rangers in my opinion. Although the quality of the Ranger footage used in Mighty Morphin was not very good, the costumes and the fight choreography were great. This is something the American-made Power Ranger sequences from the 1990s never quite matched. From the Dragon Shield looking like cheap plastic to the main suits looking like costumes someone could rent at a store, Mighty Morphin struggled whenever they were. Although the quality of the Ranger footage was used in Mighty Morphin was not very good. The costumes and the fight choreography were great though. This is something the American-made Power Ranger sequences from the 1990s never quite matched. From the Dragon Shield looking like a cheap plastic to the main suits looking like costumes someone could rent at a store, Mighty Morphin struggled whenever they weren't Ranger or Ranger 2 footage available. Revisiting Power Rangers as an adult means those differences are easy to notice. I mean, like I said, Power Rangers and Super Sentai are a bit different. Some of them follow the same format, most of them don't. But I think the suits didn't look that great until like mid-season 2 and 3 when you started notice a change in the suits. Season 2, when they went original, they got, season 1 and early season 2, they got like these bulky white necks, yet the costumes look like it can barely fit the stunt doubles. But yeah, I like where this part is going. I agree with a lot, especially with the Dragon Shield, because when they made the American version of the Green Ranger, I was completely turned off because the shield looked like it was made plastic, and it looked like you could easily punch somebody in the chest or get into a fist fight with somebody, and you could also burn the plastic off the shield for the most part. So I think we know about the whole David Yoll situation, about him being gay, being called homophobic slurs or whatever. Back then, the 90s were insane with the slurs and name callings and all of that, but behind the scenes stuff, we don't know these actors personally, but we do know what really happened thanks to a video that came out in 2010 of David Yoll's coming out as gay because of what happened behind the scenes during Zeo when he was called the F word. So I think we know what really happened behind the scenes, so I'm not even gonna like go into details, but I think you know. Billy's exit from the team during Zeo would naturally be a bittersweet moment, but knowing the reason why David Yoll's exited the show makes all Billy's exit from the team during Zeo would naturally be a bittersweet moment, but knowing the reason why David Yost exited the show makes it all disappointing and infuriating. During the interview with No Pink Spandex back in 2010, like I said, Yost revealed why he left the show after dealing with harassment on set for being gay. The original Blue Ranger actor recalled how he would be called homophobic slurs to the point he felt he was no longer worthy of being there. The show failed David Yost, and while nothing can change that, the fact Billy recently returned to the franchise for the first time in decades, and a season that also featured Power Rangers' first gay couple could not have been better news. And honestly, I think Dino Fury and Cosmic Fury did a good job on exploring gay characters done right. It didn't feel forced or anything. Some of it did, but for the most part, it worked out very well. But what's interesting enough is that David Yost decided to come back to Power Rangers after years of being mistreated on set by Saban, you know. But I think I heard one of the producers actually died at the time. But it was also Saban's fault anyway, because he has a huge role to play in this as well. But at the end of the day, I'm glad that David Yost is back on Power Rangers, and we all were very happy to see him in action, especially in Once and Always and in Cosmic Fury, where he was a team mentor, you know, for the most part. So shout out to David Yost. So regardless of what everybody thinks about Power Rangers, instead of you calling it cheesy and trash, why not just watch the show yourself and understand the lore, and watch certain seasons, and watch certain shows goofy at times. For the most part, it is appreciative of nostalgia, but I feel like if you focus on the story, darker moments, I think you will know how appreciative the original Power Ranger cast were, you know, especially season 1. And like I said, season 1 of Mighty Morphin was the most successful show because of the Jew Ranger footage and the Jew 2 footage being used, right? But I think season 2, they kind of fumbled the bag, where I felt like it was too much change as far as like new cast members, them having terribly done voice dubbing for the characters, and the doubles for the original actors to make it seem like they're there. But for the most part, even though it went through some ups and downs for the most part, I think Power Rangers for 30 years, well, going in 31 years, is about to reach its mark when the Jonathan and Twizzle reboots the entire franchise, especially Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Because I want him to reboot Mighty Morphin, because I want him to actually just work on certain characters that didn't get their shine in their original run. Like, reboot Trini's character, but make sure you add in the backstory from the comics and making it into the live action version where it makes a lot of sense, you know. So that's all I can say. What are your thoughts on this? Link to the article will be down below.